Yeah, maybe I can start by saying my name is Isabel Ordóñez. I'm working here at the Lizaba as a teacher and researcher, part of the Plastic Justice Project. We're hosting the seminar today. From this corner, unfortunately, we couldn't meet in person, but we'll do the best out of it. And this has given us the opportunity to be able to be very, very plurinational and get people involved from all around the place. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Some basic housekeeping information. The seminar is being recorded, and we will have it uploaded and available tomorrow morning at the Lizaba's YouTube page, but as a full 4-hour block. A bit undigestible, but we'll cut it down to 1-hour blocks as we have our program today by the end of next week. But the full 4 hours will be available today or tomorrow morning. And then it will also be made available through the project webpage. But then Niels and Lauren can talk a little bit more about that. The other thing is, if you want to comment and ask questions, please do it through the chat. We will, with the moderators, will be picking up questions from here and including them in the questions and answers section of each of the different blocks. We will keep to the timetable as proposed. Actually, we haven't had a big changes. So we will be starting every hour sharp. And then when we finish, we'll get a little break before the next hour starts. So we can have a little stretcher, go get some water, etc. So welcome, everybody. I'll leave the floor to Niels and Lauren.
Yeah, thank you, Isabel. Thanks for the quick introduction, and welcome, of course, to all the participants all over Europe and probably, I don't know, all over the world. We're absolutely delighted and happy to sort of, meet here. Unfortunately, of course, under these circumstances, but yeah, the next session, the next half an hour is going to be a bit of a sort of elaborate talk to introduce everyone to the topic of plastic justice, which is in fact the title of a project collaboration that we've been setting up with 5 different academies around Europe. And in particular, that's the KBK, that's the Central St. Martin's, that's Elisava, that's the Iceland School of Arts. And we also have Vilnius University of Arts in the group. And of course, what we're talking is, of course, on behalf of them too. We've been happy to sort of get funding from the European Union for this whole project, this research endeavor. And I'll be introducing with me, because the panel is together with my colleague, Lauren Alexander. Lauren, can you say hello?
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm really excited to be here with you all. And this morning, we've actually met for the first time all of our student participants from all of the 5 different schools. So we're really excited this afternoon to be joined by all of you from around the world interested in this topic. So as Niels said, it's a 5-school collaborative project, which has been in the making for about 2 years. So we're really happy finally to get kicked off with our first learning activity today.
Thank you, Lauren. And of course, we also have our lovely colleague, the lecturer of the KBK Design Lectorate, Alice Twemlow. Alice, you want to say briefly hello?
Sure. I was looking around to see where the lovely colleague was, but then I found it was me.
I love your background, by the way.
Oh, well, yes. I'm worried that it's sort of glamorizing microplastics a bit. Look, this amazing photo. But anyway, we'll get to that later.
Well, Alice,
should we just jump in?
Exactly. Alice, Lauren, and me will have an open mic policy, so we're gonna have a bit of a discussion. Maybe, Alice, do you want to take it from here?
Sure. Yeah. So, hi, everybody. Great to be part of this project, and even at this sort of peripheral level. I'm Alice Twemlow, and I'm the lector, which is like a sort of research professor at the Royal Academy of Art in The Hague. I have a nice hybrid role where I work in the Art Academy, working very hands-on with art and design research, but also at the University of Leiden, working in a more kind of humanities context of research. And as I've told students before, I like to mix up those approaches to research into a kind of, like a sort of hybrid approach. So I'm happy to have a short conversation now with Niels and Lauren, who I've had the pleasure of working with before on projects, to really sort of maybe do a little bit of framing for why it is indeed that graphic design would come together with a topic like this, and what we think it might be able to do once it's there. So I'm going to jump right in and ask you guys, because I still need to know all this. What drew you to microplastics as an issue in the first place? Obviously, there are many to choose from right now. Why that one? And which aspects of it concern you the most? So Niels, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think, I don't know, it was sort of an initiative that grew out of the idea, or like actually the sort of dichotomy between the microplastic as a sort of microscopic element, of course, and the planetary impact it has, in fact. And it's, of course, a rather sort of new research topic. We've also seen, already that we are breathing, we are actually, inhaling, we are drinking microplastics. So as a matter of fact, the impact on health is already there. And this sort of, seemingly, let's say, invisible agent has already taken the toll on us. And I think, we are happy to sort of see what art and design can do here, because of course the idea or the fact that it's such a little sort of, lethal agent actually, which has an effect on the health, should also, be visualized. We have to sort of find a language, a visual language, to sort of communicate about that. And I think this is where the role of art and design can play. Of course, we're living in times where these legal actors emerge more and more, and they operate beyond the scale of our visual perception. And I think this is really something that, we do have to deal with it, because we cannot smell it, we cannot taste it, we cannot see it or hear it. I mean, there's no way that we sort of can detect it. And I think from that perspective, it's an incredible challenge.
Yeah. Great. So this is this idea then that I actually love this aspect you're pointing to, which is the contrast or the sort of tension between something nano and then something planetary and hyper object. And perhaps, yes, as you say, we need art and design to help us make that imaginative leap between these two concepts, how something so tiny can have these profound effects, which we're right in the middle of discovering right now, aren't we? I mean, the data is coming in daily. So it's an incredibly timely topic to be involved in. Now, Lauren,
maybe I'm jump in, because it's also, as a matter of fact, a combining things between these 5 institutions, right? Like, I mean, the aspect that the effect is on planetary scale makes immediately also sort of a joint, let's say, agency. I mean, we are all interested in, facing this challenge. We have an agenda.
Well, this will just be really interesting, I think, to see how this project evolves and how these different institutions with different approaches, different philosophies, different backgrounds can cross-contaminate one another in this exploration. So I think it's going to be very rich in that respect. But I want to come back to the art and design tackling microplastics as an issue and turn this over to Lauren now. Niels mentioned the sort of the role or the way in which art and design can visualize, so sort of bring something that may be invisible or out of our familiar experience into the public imaginary. What other things is it that art and design can do here that you imagine might unfold over the course of this project?
Yeah, I think what was important for us just, I mean, taking a few steps back when we started to develop this theme within design education, was to think about kind of what themes also would be interesting for students to look into. And I think that was also something for us, considering plastic. First, you know, plastic as we usually know it, or as like I know it from my design education, has always been, you know, issues around plastic recycling, and kind of like how to reuse plastic. But then I think the focus more specifically on microplastics as being an under kind of research topic was also interesting for us. And then of course, yeah, the aspect of, you know, designers working together with scientists and people from different disciplines to be able to think about how to visualize indeed a topic which is completely invisible, which is definitely a challenge. And we're going to have to see how and invent our own language and visual vocabulary to explore that further. But in our experience, it's been really valuable working with different collaborators in bringing kind of external collaborators into the classroom to at least make a start to kind of mapping out and trying to kind of point to different networks in which these issues kind of permeate. So maybe just initially we would be able to, yeah, to kind of identify not only the microplastics issue, but also how that connects more broadly to other industries or maybe unexpected actors that we'd never thought of before. So I think for us, you know, just visually mapping out, but then also maybe inventing our own kind of, yeah, way of looking, our own perspective and own way of creating narratives related to this very complex global narrative or global issue, sorry.
Yeah, I would expect that would be the case. I don't think, you know, the idea of trying to visualize it without the, you know, the power of narrative or something, the use of image over time, I think it is going to be very difficult. So this idea of sort of narrative in motion and with all of the range of sort of research tools at hand, I think is going to come into play. So I also wanted to understand better, maybe Niels, you could jump in here. Why justice? Why, as we've covered, why the plastic, but what is the justice aspect of this project? You mentioned legal actors before. Does it relate to that or to climate justice, or what's the thinking there?
Well, of course, if we're talking about justice, we're also talking about crime. And in the end, we're also talking about, committing crimes. And we also have to sort of ask ourselves, who are the actors involved? And I think it's interesting to sort of see that, we all part of this crime, right? Like, I mean, there's of course a cause and effect. And but we are in fact also the consumers as much as the industry, as much as the politicians who are actually sort of in fact just framing and trying to sort of give in a framework where we operate. I mean, this needs to be readjusted because of course if it all comes down to the effect of health being under as a health threat, then I think then we really just need to understand that we have to change something about it. And I guess the power also is to do it by legal means, and that's I think where I'd also like to sort of see and understand this sort of to quote, I think a good friend of ours, Susan Shupley, who was saying like, can you bring an iceberg to court? I mean, how far does climate change? Is that something that there are people involved who really have who are culpable for their actions?
Alice, could I ask you a question?
Yeah, sure. You asking Niels or me?
You, Alice.
Yeah.
So you've been involved in your project at KBK, the Design in the Deep Future. So I thought maybe it might be useful for you to tell us what that is very briefly, and maybe because the question you asked to me, sort of like what design methods can we use to visualize or to better understand this issue, maybe like some of the things that have come up in your project might be useful for us and all those designers listening out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, basically, I have a research project that I've called Design in the Deep Future, which it actually does just what Niels described in a way, sort of taking a different look at design instead of just looking at design as a perfect, complete object that gets used, you know, for a very brief amount of time. To actually try and understand it as something that comes from a material, and before that matter, and then needs to be broken down afterwards into matter, and how long you know, it will have implications, serious, profound implications on the planet and as we're seeing with this topic in the human body. So we're kind of stretching out of time is what I'm interested in, and I'm using the term deep time to refer to a geological concept of a sort of inconceivable amount of time that how geology works through. So that's the larger project, and I'm interested within that, I suppose, in things like digital waste and some other topics are space junk, which actually my background looks rather similar to that. But among them all, we look at plastics and microplastics specifically. So yeah, this is great that it kind of intersects with a research interest of mine. And what I do is I work with tutors and students and all kinds of people to I suppose I'm really interested in zooming in on the methods used to conduct research, and it does get a bit meta sometimes, and but in this kind of context I think it's okay to talk about it. But you know, just thinking through what is it that art and design brings to a research inquiry, right? So sure, you talked earlier about collaboration with scientists, and that's super interesting, and that can be worked out in many different ways. What we don't want, of course, though, is to be the illustrators for the scientists, because that's not so interesting. But there are other things I think that happen when we take methods from the humanities and the social sciences, whether it's interviewing, whether it's embedded participatory research, whether it's something like walking as a research method, which I'm really interested in right now, or whether it's digital methods, these kinds of things. I think when it gets put through a designer's sensibility and a design lens, it shifts slightly and allows, it has new capacities. And these are a little bit tricky to kind of precisely put your finger on what it is. But I think anyone who's conducted research, looking through the eyes, you know, as acknowledging themselves as an artist or a designer and doing that research, knows that something happens, something's different. And I try and go about, I don't want formulas, I don't want little lists of steps, of recipes or anything like that, but I do quite like to capture people's experiences of working in this way, and that's part of the work I do.
But I think what is really interesting, Alice, because it's indeed the deep future, right? Like that's sort of the title. What it all somehow tackles is this understanding of time. And of course, that's also where science and artists have to deal with. If we are dealing with matter that goes beyond the lifetime of ourselves. And this is, of course, like an understanding that we haven't yet somehow mastered, especially sort of if you look at the industry and the production and consumption also of objects. I mean, we do actually have no clue what happens with elements or matter that we have created and just, I don't know, goes beyond our sort of perception. How do you think can we deal with that?
Well, my first reaction to that is, and this is tricky when you're working with artists and designers, because they usually really want to make something very quickly. And it's not that I'm against making, because obviously that is a form of research and you can work towards answers, but usually new questions iteratively, right? You can use the design or the art practice to explore these questions. But in general, because I've got the stage right now, I would say I'm not really a solutionist kind of person. And I think a lot of the time I'm urging for pause, well, Donna Haraway puts it very well, staying with the trouble, getting in amongst all of this trash and filth and mess that we've made and understanding it before we figure out these sort of ultimate solutions. So I know the speakers today are going to come from all different perspectives and bring all different views on this, and that's fantastic. And I think that's what it takes, actually, is a multitude of approaches. But I'm just saying with mine, I think it's about dwelling and understanding the issue and helping, like I said at the beginning, to try and create a nuanced understanding of the issue in the public imaginary. That's my goal anyway.
Lauren, do you want to share a bit more also about the experience that we had with our collaborators? I mean, because of course we have been.
I just had a first thought before you continue. The plastic behind me is in a museum, and this is from 1860. So it just occurred to me, maybe, just maybe, Alice, it's the same plastic that's behind you. Do you think that's possible?
I like that. I like that thought a lot. Although, and yes, and that is indeed the idea, is to sort of think about how things leak out of these perfect forms that designers put them into, designers as we, and how they're used and how they then start leaking out, literally, physically, as we're seeing with microplastics, but also kind of conceptually, you know, when our idea of when something becomes trash happens in the mind before it does physically. Something's already, you've trashed something conceptually before you throw it out. So yes, I love that linkage you're making. Although this plastic that was developed in the 1800s is a far nicer kind of plastic. These are the sort of the proto forms of I've forgotten the name of this one, but it builds up to Bakelite, right?
Yeah, Parkesine it's called.
Parkesine. Yeah, Parkesine. Yeah, not quite as.
No, Alice,
go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, I mean, now that you're telling the history of plastic, you also have to mention, of course, like the plastic conglomerate, I assume, because of course, yeah, it seems that The Hague has a rather famous reputation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was just making a point that what has happened, unfortunately, as often is the case, as people were frustrated with the kind of plastic that's behind you because it was very brittle and could only be used for certain products. What happened is we got better and better at making it more and more flexible and usable and mass producible and disposable. And so that's what has led to the situation that people are going to explain to us today in more scientific terms about its sort of the way friction can make it erode into these little particles that are all around us. But yes, so the plastic conglomerate is my friend. He's this nasty beast, which is the newest form of rock, and it's made. They're finding it a lot in Hawaii at the moment because you have a lot of volcanic lava there. And what's happening is that it's a mixture, a sort of entwined entanglement of natural sediment like rocks and things like that, and sand, but with molten plastic. So you end up with this nasty sort of, like I think of it as a sort of legacy or inheritance that we, as the era of mass production, the Anthropocene, what we're sort of giving to our future, which is this fusion of nature and culture and plastic and rock, and it's called Conglomerate. So yes, I do dwell on it quite a lot, Niels, you're right, and I find it quite hard to get past, because it somehow sums up the sort of, in so many ways, the mistakes we've made. Yeah.
Well, I guess it also offers the solution, right? Like if it's sort of the fusion, if the problem is the fusion, then probably the our approach to it should be similar.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because I have a slightly maybe slightly contentious or provocative point that I really want to be, maybe just as a footnote to this entire project, if anyone's interested in it. And it's really the idea that it may not be the ultimate. It may not be only one way of going about this, which is to kind of separate out the plastic particles from our existence, right? I noticed that the language that's being used around microplastics already, just as it is with coronavirus, by the way, is very military. It's very much us and them. We've got to sort of attack the problem, remove the pollutant, etc. And of course that's a natural reaction, but I'm finding the sort of reading I'm doing at the moment a lot about fungi, along with a lot of other people, I think, and specifically the work of Anna Singh, who's an anthropologist, and she's written a book called The Mushroom at the End of the World, and she's really drawn my attention to the fact how interconnected we are, not only with the nice things like the trees and the birds and the animals, but also the trash and the toxins and the waste. And what fungi does is it figures out a way to coexist, and she sort of develops this idea of ferality, being a feral an inhabitant of the earth. And I'm not saying we have to sit back and relax and just let microplastics invade and the rest of it, but I do think it's an alternative to the solutionist military kind of we've got to extract everything, maybe to try and understand how it is part of this bizarrely ever-evolving coexistence that we find ourselves in. And it's similar conversations going on with the immunologists and the people studying the virus, I think, right now. And it's not something I'm equipped to talk about in any scientific way, but more in a kind of mostly metaphorical and possibly, as a reference point, I suppose, this idea of contamination. So I'm just going to lodge that there in your chat or in the world of this, and see if it develops any.
Well, you were referring, as a matter
further,
of fact, Alice, you were referring, of course, to Donna Haraway, and I think, if there's anything that of course she's famous for, is the Cyborg Manifesto. So the fact that we, in fact, already like inhaling and eating and God knows what plastic, I mean, we probably are already the set of plastic cyborgs anyways.
Exactly. And this is not, and again, this is certainly not something to celebrate at all. And I'm not saying that. It's just more like, again, that idea of sort of making sure we spend enough time understanding where it is we are before we depart onto our various solutionist kind of
well, I think it's also
with that note, I think
we have
I have the role of the timekeeper. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you. Yeah, no, I see we've run quite a schedule.
Yes, so we have to move on. Thank you very much, Niels, Alice, and Lauren. It was very interesting to listen to you. I just want to point out that in the chat, Dr. Raymond was very much agreeing with design not as a communication tool. And I think that is important to frame it, and for the students that are participating in the project to think about that long term, like that action doesn't always concur in this communication and this like hands-on militaristic solutions, as you put it, Alice.
Yeah, thanks very much for sharing that thought, indeed, yeah.
Yeah, Madhuri, I am going to introduce you and ask you to take the floor. I am picking up my notes here. So Madhuri Prabhakar, you can correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, is a
Prabhakar,
campaigner. No? Okay. Is a campaigner for the Beat the Microbead campaign by the Plastic Soup Foundation. This campaign is against the use of microplastics in cosmetics, and she's begun working at the foundation 4 years ago and hopes to have the future of beauty industry to be completely microplastics free. Take it away.
Yeah. Is it all right to share a presentation?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Just a second. Let's see if I can do it on a presentation mode.
There you go.
Yeah, it
Yep.
works.
Yep.
Okay. Just a second. Yeah. Let's do it like this. Is it possible for everybody to see?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, okay. Hello, everybody. This is Madhuri, and yeah, as Isabel said, I'm a campaigner at the Plastic Soup Foundation for their Beat the Microbead project. I've been working there for 4 years, and today I'm here just to give you a slight picture of microplastics, what they are, where they end up, what they do in our environment, and all of that. But before I go into this presentation, I just want to start with some facts and kind of give you an overall picture of what's happening with plastic in general in the environment, and then we'll go more into microplastics. So I'm going to start strong and straightforward with the big fact that is currently happening, which is we're putting 8 million tons of plastic into our oceans every year. This is an issue because, as we all figured out by now, plastic is something that takes forever to disintegrate or at all integrate in the environment. It takes about 500 to 1,000 years to do so. So we're creating or have created a material that will outlive all of us, and all the plastic that has ever been produced still exists in some form of shape in our planet right now. Only 1% of this plastic that is entering our oceans is actually floating on the surface. About 99% disappears immediately under the water or get trapped into coastal environments. But how does this plastic actually end up in the ocean? About 80% of this waste is actually land-based. And all of this comes or starts at land and any part of our countries, and through our rivers end up in the ocean. Plastic coming from rivers is one of the main sources of how plastic ends up in the environment or in our oceans. Now let's talk about what actually happens to the plastic which reach our waters or oceans. It breaks down. It breaks down because into smaller and smaller pieces, and there are many factors that might happen in the ocean. That could be the UV radiation or the movement of the waves or the currents. It reacts with salt as well, that makes it disintegrate. And maybe only because of time, because it spends so much time in the ocean and contributing to all of these factors, it breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. So all the plastic that ends up in our ocean, be it plastic bottles or bags or containers, they break down into smaller pieces that are known as microplastics. So what are microplastics actually? The fact that microplastic ended up in the ocean and that's where it was found in the beginning, that's the context where the first definition of microplastics in a very scientific term came in. So microplastics are loosely defined as plastic particles that are smaller than 5 millimeter. And that's the context of the definition. That's just the kind of plastic or microplastic that are first found in the environment. This is the reason why microplastics are maybe even a bigger problem in our times than plastic pollution in general. And that's because microplastics are small, and once they are released in the environment, it's almost nearly impossible to clean them up entirely. So that makes it a big problem. Well, a lot of people feel that plastic soup or plastic pollution in the ocean looks like this. It actually looks like this because plastic is everywhere in all kinds of waters and all kinds of parts of the ocean on our planet. It is estimated that approximately 5.25 to 50 trillion microplastics are in the ocean at the moment. But as you can see, this range is quite huge and massive because actually it is quite difficult to get an exact number of how many microplastics there are in the ocean because they also keep breaking up with time. So there is no way to know the exact amount of microplastics there are in the ocean. Other estimations say that there are about 46,000 pieces in every square mile of ocean, weighing up to 269,000 tons. These are big numbers to digest and even hard to visualize. But yeah, this is what's happening. Well, all the plastics that do end up in the ocean and break down into smaller pieces are actually known as the secondary microplastics because they were not intended to become or enter the ocean in that shape or size. So all the secondary microplastics are microplastics that break down from bigger pieces of plastic that enter the ocean. But there are also some other not obvious sources of marine microplastic pollution, and they are called primary microplastics because they were intended and manufactured in that size. And well, ahead, I will give you more examples of these primary kind of microplastics. So this is how the scientific community or the conversation around microplastic is divided into the primary and the secondary microplastics. There are big 5 sources of these microplastics that kind of makes up the percentage of microplastic pollution. First, let's talk about clothes and textiles. 60% of the clothes we wear are made of synthetic materials like polyester or nylon. And when you put them in your washing machine, they lose plastic microfibers. Microplastics from textiles can also come from other sources like your clothes, your carpets or furniture, because they're also textile and fabrics. That's where it loses microplastics or microfibers from, and they can be lost because of friction or touch of your hands. Even can lose a lot of microfibers from fabrics and textiles. One way to kind of combat this problem, or like what you can do about it, is wash your clothes less, or because then you'll, of course, it will release less microfibers, or to wear secondhand clothes because secondhand clothes tend to lose less microfibers because the first 5 or 4 washes of a newly made fabric release the most amount of microfibers in your washing machine. Or you can put a microfiber filter in your washing machine to prevent that. Then there is cosmetics or personal care products like facial scrubs, toothpaste, shampoo, and even makeup contains microplastics. Manufacturers add microplastic to these products as emulsifying agent or viscosity agent, or just as cheap fillers. Sometimes plastic in your cosmetics bind them together or improve their texture. Even the most expensive brands have microplastic ingredients in them. So it's not something like a cheap brand has microplastics just because it's cheap. As part of my campaign, Beat the Microbead campaign, we have introduced last year an app called Beat the Microbead app, and it's free to download, and you can scan the ingredients of your cosmetics and personal care products, and the app lets you know if there are microplastics in there. And that way, you can always scan your products before you buy them and see if they contain any microplastics. Another source is tires. Car tires are made from a mix of natural and synthetic rubber, and they wear and tear during use. A single tire will wear around 1.5 kilos before it has to be replaced by a new one. So where does all of these wear and tear go? these tiny microplastics end up in the air and are almost impossible to clean up. So for now, there is no effective solution to kind of combat this problem. But one of the recommendations that experts give is to reduce your speed while driving. That can help reduce the amount of friction it has and the amount of microplastics it will let go of. Of course, the another one is plastic packaging or plastic product packaging that ends up in the ocean, as I just mentioned. That's another source of microplastics. 50% of all plastics is single-use plastic and only 9% has ever been recycled. So yeah, these bottles, containers, they break down over time in the ocean. And yeah, that's one of the biggest sources of secondary microplastics in the ocean. That's why it is important to even introduce systems like deposit return schemes that can recover at least plastic bottles that end up in the ocean or in the environment. So that's one of the way that can be prevented. Another less obvious source is paint. Paint is used on all kinds of buildings, boats, roads, everywhere. And of course, one of the reasons why paint releases microplastics is also because of wear and tear due to the weather conditions or just with time. And then there is this source of microplastic called nurdles, which is kind of becoming more and more of a topic now. This is, I don't know if you probably have noticed these little tiny beads looking like plastic in coastal areas already. Nurdles are called, or plastic pellets. They are also smaller than 5 millimeter, and they're used as a kind of a raw material to kind of produce and manufacture all kinds of plastic products or yeah, packaging. They are shipped in huge containers all over the world. And one of the ways why they end up in the environment is because there's a lot of spillage in the sea or in the way it's transported, starting from the factories and manufacturing units. There is spill in the entire life cycle of nurdles, and that's how they end up in millions and billions in the environment. In EU alone, up to 23 billion nurdles end up in the environment every day. We in the Netherlands, Plastic Zoo Foundation has started doing research on this topic as well. The video is not working, but yeah, so we went to a lot of factories in the Netherlands that produce nurdles, and we went looking around them, and there's so many spillage of nurdles everywhere around that factory. If you go around the area, you can see like this nurdle sand kind of yeah, ecosystem around the factories, and it's something that we started to take legal action against and make manufacturers responsible to prevent the spillage of nurdle in this entire life cycle. But where do all of these microplastics end up when they get to the environment? What kinds of places are we talking about? They have been found almost every part of the Earth. There is no part on the Earth that is free of plastic pollution or microplastic pollution. In recent years, scientists have tracked microplastics to thousands of locations. There are rivers and beaches, you can find microplastics there. All along the coasts around the world. Ocean microplastics can also be found at the surface, but also throughout the whole column in the ocean. They have been found in the deepest point of our Earth, which is at Mariana Trench. That's 11 kilometers underwater. They have also been found at the top of the mountains, like Mount Everest, Himalayas, Pyrenees, US national parks. Microfibers have been found all of those places. It has also been found in soil. A lot of the time, our water treatment plants are not able to filter all the microplastics, but the microplastics they do filter they become the part of the sludge. So sludge is kind of the material that's all the solid kind of material that is collected through our water treatment plants. And in many cases, those sludge is applied to our agricultural lands as fertilizers. And that's one way how microplastics are ending up in our soil, and through that also to our fruits and vegetables. So at this point, we do know, and Niels mentioned it very briefly as well, that we know that microplastics have been found in our food, in our water, and in our air. Now the big question is what they actually do in the environment, what their effects are, and what their effects are on our bodies. And a lot of the experts on this panel will talk about that shortly. So yeah, I'm looking forward to all of the discussion. So thank you very much. And of course, if you have any questions, you can find a lot of information on our website, but also I'm here to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Madhuri. Lauren, you are gonna manage this.
Yeah. Hey, Madhuri, thank you very much for your presentation. I just had a question about your Beat the Microbeads campaign. Maybe you could explain a little bit more about that, specifically your victories that you've had coming out of that campaign regarding eliminating microbeads.
Yeah, just to start with, we started with this campaign, we started around, I think 2011 or 12. And when we started, we were only talking about microbeads, and microbeads are a bit different than microplastics used in cosmetic sense, because microbeads have very specific function in products like scrubs or toothpastes, and they have like this scrubbing kind of function. But microplastics can be used for any purpose and any amount in products. So when we started with microbeads, of course, we were just fighting the tip of the iceberg. Today, we know that there are more than 500 kinds of microplastic that are used in cosmetic and personal care products. And that's the only one that we are kind of aware now. We continually do research into what kinds of ingredients used in microplastics, in cosmetics. So yeah, that number keeps growing and growing. And with microbeads, there are many countries around the world who have taken legal action against them, and they're banned in countries like Sweden or UK. But yeah, again, it's just tip of the iceberg, and we're talking about a very small amount of microbeads as compared to microplastics that are used in personal care products.
There's actually a question here in our chat from Renata, who's listening, and she's just wondering about the cosmetic industry in general. I wonder if you could share a little bit more about the kind of awareness that exists in the cosmetic industry, like in which other kinds of cosmetics can we actually find microplastics?
Absolutely, all kinds. There are, I think, everything that you can imagine may or can contain microplastics, but doesn't mean that they do and have to. Of course, there's a large part of the industry that does use those ingredients, but there are also brands that do not. So as part of Beat the Microbead campaign, what we also do is kind of give this acknowledgement logo to brands that do not use those microplastic ingredients at all. So for now, we have like around 110 brands that we kind of provided with our Zero Plastic Inside logo. So there are brands out there that are doing good and are not using any of these ingredients. So it's possible, but on a larger level, yeah, it's still used very, very widely at this moment. Yeah.
Madhuri.
I'm going to pitch in. There's another question that Libby Higgins is writing here. Are the effects of microplastics reversible, or can we only improve upon how we use plastics in the future? This I don't know, might be a question for the next panelists, but I'll leave it with you anyway.
Yeah. As I said in my presentation, microplastic problem is, to me, it feels more urgent because that's something that I feel that it's irreversible damage because of its size, that once it's out there in ocean, you're not gonna be able to retrieve it. Or in rivers, for example. There are certain solutions and innovation coming with tools to kind of stop microplastics from the river so it doesn't enter in the ocean in the first place. But yeah, the moving forward would be to kind of rethink ways we use these particles and how we can stop it at the source. That's kind of what our organization do as well. We try to look at the plastic problem and see how we can stop it at the source before it's already a problem in the ocean or rivers or whatever. So yeah, talking about cosmetics as well, then there to stop it at the source would be to not use or those microplastics, or just stop using products that do contain microplastics.
Madhuri, I know, of course, that your organization is sort of trying to sort of, yeah, also beat microplastic on a sort of legal level. I would like to come back to this justice aspect. And of course, can you share a bit like what is the challenge of actually, really how hold these this industry accountable for their doing?
In terms of cosmetics, for example, we are also very legally involved because there is a European level investigation going on at the moment in intentionally added microplastics. So these are microplastics that are intentionally added to products like paint or detergents or cosmetics. And there we find it very challenging to even agree with the industry on something as basic as defining microplastics. So that's already a challenge to even kind of define the problem to even able to fix it. So there are a lot of there's heavy lobbying and it's very difficult to come up with on a agreement. But there are restriction processes happening now, so that's something way better than if we compare 5 to 10 years ago. But there is still a lot to do, and there's a lot of challenges to be faced in that.
There is one question in this line. You talked about seeking legal action against nerdles at the industry level, but how much personal accountability do we all have in this issue? Posed by Luis Grosjean.
With nerdles, that's something that that's where, let's say, consumer is removed, because this is not the direct problem that consumers are facing with. Nerdles are, as I said, a raw material to make plastic products, and that's something that's happening on a very industrial manufacturing level. So their government intervention is very much needed, and for industry to also realize the kind of pollution they are creating, and that needs to be stopped. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, at least in the Netherlands, involve local government and environmental agencies and deal with the manufacturers, talk with them, and get them to clean up the mess they made, and take extra precautions to not let them escape their factories.
Okay, maybe another question, Madhuri, of course, maybe from the side as a designer, I was wondering, what do you think from a perspective of an NGO can we offer to you as a sort of, designer, artist, you call it, people who are visually engaged? What do you think could be the benefit also of collaborating with students of young age and also visually great?
I think because as we work with an NGO, and sometimes we get very caught up into the scientific or like the factual way of moving people. What design can help is to give a different kind of intervention to the problem. And as your discussion kind of come through with Alice, as to visualize the problem in a way that moves people differently, that would drive them or motivate them to change, kind of. So that's where it would be interesting.
Imagine also alternatives, I guess, right? Like
exactly.
Yeah.
To kind of for us, it's like, of course we have the knowledge, but to give the creative aspect, creative imagining, to kind of not solve the problem, but to bring forward it. That's something that really excites me. Yeah.
I don't know if Alice is still here, but is there something you would like to respond to? Or did she probably...
We need to cut.
That's also good. It's fine.
just so we have a 5-minute break, there is one more question from Ignacio Mateo. If Madhuri, do you consider football or sports artificial turf made from small pieces of tires a big source of microplastics? I would ask if you could maybe answer on the chat so that we
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. I will do that.
And be sure just to copy everybody, all attendants. And then
Yeah.
we have a 5-minute pause now, so that at 3 sharp, we start with our next block. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Madhuri.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Madhuri, and thank
Glad
you.
to be here.